In this concept video, we're going to be discussing the trigonometric functions on the coordinate plane, and we're actually going to be developing our first trigonometric identities. So, as just a reminder, let me draw a coordinate plane here. And let's also imagine that there's a circle that is centered at the origin. And if I draw an angle in standard position, create a reference triangle out of it, I'll label this distance from the center to the edge of, or to the circle as r. The up and the down is y, and then the left and the right here is x. So we can understand the sine of theta now to be opposite over hypotenuse, or y over r. Also, the cosecant is the reciprocal, so it's r over y. The cosine of theta is still adjacent. Here's theta, that's the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. But we can now understand it as x over r. The secant is r over x. And the tangent will be opposite over adjacent, so still y over x. And the cotangent will be the reciprocal, x over y. At this point, if you have your trig ID or trig identities toolkit, should look like this, please get that out. And you'll want to write down your reciprocals here. The sine of theta is 1 over the cosecant of theta, and the cosecant of theta is 1 over the sine of theta, and that follows from our reciprocals that we talked about before. And then we've got the cosine and the secant being reciprocal, and then the tangent is going to be 1 over the cotangent, and the cotangent will be 1 over the tangent. Now we'll move on to your first new trigonometric identities. Notice how the tangent of theta is y over x. We're going to multiply that by 1 over r over 1 over r. So we're not changing this relationship, we're just multiplying it by 1. But what will happen is we now have the tangent of theta as being y over r over x over r. Notice, I'll move this up just a touch for you, notice how y over r, that's just the sine. So we can replace it with the sine. X over r is cosine. So we now have a quotient identity, and that is that the tangent of theta, and if we follow this all the way through, the tangent of theta is equal to the sine of theta over the cosine of theta. The cotangent is just going to be the reciprocal, so that'll be the cosine of theta over the sine of theta. And again, if you have your trigonometric identities toolkit, you can break that out, and on the right hand side you should see space for that. So the tangent is equal to the sine over the cosine, and the cotangent is the cosine over the sine. For the Pythagorean identity, we're going to start off with the Pythagorean theorem. That's x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared on our original triangle right here. An interesting thing happens when we divide everything, or the left and the right side, by r squared. We get x squared over r squared plus y squared over r squared is equal to 1. And if we rewrite x over r, the quantity being squared, and y over r, the quantity being squared, equal to 1, we can now substitute in the cosine of theta and the sine of theta here, and that's equal to 1. This is normally written like this, with the 2 next to the cosine. These are the same thing. They mean exactly the same thing. So this is cosine squared, and this is sine squared. So right here is the form you're going to see written down. So we can actually fill that in on our Pythagorean trigonometric identities toolkit. We've got the cosine squared plus the sine squared is equal to 1. We're going to work with this relationship here, and on the right hand side what I'm going to do is I am going to divide by the sine squared on the left and the right. Notice here how that's just the cotangent squared, cosine over sine, plus 1 is equal to the reciprocal of sine is the cosecant. So this is another Pythagorean one. If we did the opposite, if we took cosine squared plus sine squared equal to 1 and divided by cosine squared, we'll develop another one that's based off of the Pythagorean theorem, the Pythagorean identity. That's 1 plus sine over cosine is the tangent, and then 1 over the cosine is the secant. So these are the three main ones you're going to see. You can also rearrange this one by like subtracting cosine squared from each side or subtracting sine squared. That does work. But these are some that you're going to want to know. So let's fill those in our trigonometric identities toolkit. So here's the main one, cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1, or it could be sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1, that's fine. And then we're going to want to write down cotangent squared plus 1 is equal to cosecant squared. And you can build that from this one, you just have to divide by sine squared on each side. And then there's also another one, and that's 1 plus the tangent squared is equal to the secant squared. So voila, we've got quotient, reciprocal, and then also Pythagorean done.